I'm Scott Al Miller. It's the 13th of December, 2023. This is my vlog of daily life living in Leon, Nicaragua. I got an email from someone who had some questions about taking a trip here to Nicaragua, and I thought that the questions he asked warranted some videos to explain a few different things, because he asked a couple questions that were all very basic and seems like just very straightforward questions you would ask, but I think they prompted some real ooh, I think there's things you need to know about Nicaragua and Managua in specific that may be important before planning a trip like this, and the information is very general, so I'm going to do a couple videos that cover a few of these things for you guys so that everyone can get this information. So today we're going to talk about why Managua is not a city you want to go to walk around, and of course, where you can go if you want to come to Nicaragua on a city walking vacation. So if you're like me and many other people, walking a city on your vacations or when you're traveling is something that you really like to do. And it's a great way to get to know a place, because you're going to be normally on your own. You have an opportunity to simply walk by, say, a restaurant or a shop or a museum. And if the mood hits you, you can simply go in, or it lets you go to restaurants and maybe just sample little things here and there. You see a cafe, sit and people watch when you want, take a moment to relax, move on to the next place, stare at maps and just explore as things interest you. As you walk, you'll find that maybe something looks more interesting than something else, and you'll take a change of direction as you go. That works out great. So walking around cities can be fantastic, and I've done this all over the world, and I love it, and I highly recommend it for most people. Of course, city walks do pose some dangers, so be aware that you do need to know about safety in cities you're going to. You need to know a certain number of things. So that's always a factor. I don't want to encourage people to just blindly go walk around cities all over the world, because if you did that in the United States, for example, you would not last very long. Not that there aren't lots of places that you can't walk safely in the US, but you have to be aware. There's very few American cities where it's safe to walk just anywhere. Even my home city of Rochester, New York, you can be walking in beautiful areas, take one wrong turn, and in 5 minutes on foot, go from totally safe to abject danger, just like that. So it's important to know where those things are and just be aware before you go walking too much. If you're in Europe, you have a lot more safety than most places. And a lot of Asia you can walk around too. And certainly lots of Latin America and North America have lots of great places you can walk. But do your research for sure. Okay, and for those who watch my channel, I do a lot of city walking, and a lot of places I go are very safe. But I do go places that I would not necessarily recommend others go alone walking around. It may look safe because I'm doing it, I'm very aware, and I know the environment that I'm in, and I'm taking calculated risks, and I'm not at any point doing something where I'm in fear for my life, but I may be worried a little bit about my camera being stolen or even potentially being mugged. I'm aware of those risks, and I'm also doing a lot of things to mitigate them. I'm also not a very big target. Generally, when I'm out doing things, right, I'm a big guy, I'm aware of my environment, I know what time of day I'm there, I am paying attention to the people around me, I know that I'm walking alone and what to pay attention to. I'm also often on a camera that makes it less obvious to other people that I'm looking behind me much of the time. And when you guys see my face on the camera, that means I see it too. So when there's things behind me, yes, my screen's tiny, but I do see things. All that's just to say, be aware when walking in cities. I do recommend it, but you have to be careful. Now, Managua, our topic today is, why do you not want to consider Managua for this in general? So we've talked about this a bit on the channel, but it's important to point out in this context, Managua is not a traditional city. If you were looking at cities in the region that are similar, big cities in the region like Tegucigalpa, San Pedro Sula, Guatemala City, San Jose, and Costa Rica, all those cities make it pretty easy to get an apartment or a hotel somewhere near the center of the city, even in just nearby barrios, walk into the city and walk through a lot of downtown areas, maybe some neighboring things. You'll probably run into a lot of museums and cafes and those kinds of things. You'll have a lot of stuff that you can go pretty quickly from place to place, and in a moderate 5 to 10 mile day, which is a pretty good walk, but if that's what you're doing for the day, it's not that much. You can see a ton of things and get a lot of really interesting stuff and have just large amounts of very contiguous, safe areas to walk through. You have to research and know where you're going, but you can do it for sure. In Managua, the city is completely different. The first thing is there is no dense downtown. There's no dense area and there's no downtown. Either one of those things. So that gives you no place to base yourself where you can then walk to other things easily. That makes it a big challenge on its own. There's also, it has this village effect. At no point do you feel like you're really in a city. Now, it is relatively dense, right? I don't want to say it's not dense. It's certainly an urban area, but it's an urban area with 1 and maybe 2-story buildings nearly everywhere. And so you have just attached houses, detached houses, gated communities, things sprinkled all throughout the city. Nothing's really close to each other. It's very difficult to go from one business to another in a normal city walking environment. It kind of feels like you're in the suburbs all the time. Some combination of a very dense suburb or a whole bunch of moderate-sized villages all mashed together. And that makes Managua really unique and an interesting city. And certainly I encourage people to give Managua a second look. It really is a nice city with good restaurants and neat places to go. But the overall feeling of the city is not what you would expect if you're used to doing city walks around the world. Even as a very serious city walker and someone who knows Managua quite well and has spent a lot of time there, my ability to walk around the city borders on zero. There's first of all, if you're going to walk from any large distance, chances are you're going to cross from relatively safe areas to relatively poor barrios. This is Nicaragua. No place is super dangerous, but that doesn't make it a good place to go walking, right? You're going to stand out like a sore thumb. You're going to be incredibly unique. And those who have watched me walk through Managua, typically you see me go through very remote areas where I'm doing long walks and going through neat regions of the city, but they're all relatively safe, even if they're very far out from shopping centers or really dense areas. I'm going through areas that are not really poor, dense housing zones where I'm able to maintain visibility. I'm able to get to other things if I need to. Those areas that you may end up in if you don't know the city incredibly well, again, they're not dangerous, but they're not places you would just go walking under normal circumstances. So, and they're not places you would normally visit, and they're not places that people are going to expect you to visit. And anyone who sees you is going to assume you are lost, and most people, if they see that, will simply come help you or ignore you. But you have put yourself in a position where there are many people who are paying attention to you, and they're all aware that you probably shouldn't be there, and you are definitely not aware of your environment, and you're a target. So that's not something you want to do. I don't expect anyone to do this and end up stabbed or anything like that, but if you're looking for a completely peaceful, no problems type adventure where you're able to walk around the city, that's going to make it really challenging. Now, if you do your research, you can walk around a lot of Managua quite safely. And people have seen me do this for miles and miles and miles. And I will continue to walk around Managua and bring you more of the city by video and show paths that you can take and places you can explore very safely, should that be something you want to do. But it's going to take a lot of planning, a lot of work if you want to do that. So as but it's very important to understand that there's really no place in the city where you could get a hotel or an apartment and be able to branch out and just walk the city indefinitely. And if you do, definitely watch my Managua walking videos. I did some in the last 4 months. I was based at the Hilton Princess, which is, I don't necessarily recommend that. My kids really like staying there, and it's a handy location to where we were at the time. It is a nice place. It's just quite expensive for Managua, and if you're looking for that Nicaragua experience, people go there because they want the American experience when they live in Nicaragua. It's not the place to go if you want to experience Nicaragua, for sure. But I am a fan of Hilton, so it works out great. And from there, but you could stay anywhere in that general vicinity, and walking up the Carretera Messiah, whether you're going north up to the lake or south, eventually all the way to Messiah, can work out pretty well, but you're just going along one really major suburban highway. It does cut through the middle of the city, so you'll see some important stuff, but you're going along strip malls and real malls and gas stations and hotels along this one major highway. It's decently walkable. It's a little bit of a challenge crossing at some of the intersections. It's not really meant for people to walk in general because people don't, but you can. you could see a lot of the city. Some of the major highways that cross it, yes, you could also follow them and for the most part stay quite safe, but you're not going to see the city in the way that you're hoping to see in most cases. You can, with the Carretera Messiah, make it all the way up to the lake. You can explore along the lakefront. You can get to the National Mall area where like the National Palaces and those buildings, the important downtown parks. You can see a bit. But if you're looking at more than 1 to 2 days of walking, you are probably going to find that it is not the most rewarding city walk experience, and you're going to be a very expensive area to stay. So in general, if you're looking to walk a city, I'm going to say, unfortunately, Managua is just really difficult for that. But that's not necessarily all bad news. It's just Managua's the wrong place if that's what you want to do. If you do want to do that, if you're just, I really want to get to know Managua, and if you're seriously considering a move to Managua, for example, then walking the city may make sense, even if it's a lot of effort. For me, if I was going to do that, I would probably stay somewhere in the Los Robles areas. I'm a big fan of Los Robles as a part of the city, or near Villa Fontana. That area, which is all very close to where I mentioned, like the Hilton Princesa. If that is something you're looking to do, that's where I would probably stay. Now, some of you who live in Managua spend a lot more time there than me. Jack Pittman, for example, if any of you can jump in and give some advice on where you think staying in Managua might be superior to that for someone who really wants to walk and see as much of the reasonable parts of the city as they can, I'd love that advice, right? I am not the expert on that. I think Los Robles and Villa Fontana would function pretty well. They would be some of the better spots. From there, I know I can walk all the way to the lake without a problem. I can walk to loads of restaurants. I know that at night, when I'm back from my walks, that it's safe to walk around and see things in that local area in the dark. I don't have any security concerns in that particular region. If you need to get public transportation, either a bus or just like a taxi, very easy. If you want to be able to eat late at night, no problem at all. Things are open very late. If you want to get delivery, no problem at all. Everything delivers to that area. It's both central and relatively affluent and very safe. And it has a lot of nightlife. That's where the Zona Rosa is and those kinds of things. So that, I think, is a great area to base out of, and I use that area significantly, right? I've been using it for 3 years. It's where we stayed when we were first moving into the country. It's where we stayed when we were looking at things in the country. It's where we typically stay when we're hanging out. And it's where we tend to go out if we're spending the night in Managua, if we're looking for nightlife. And so it's a very functional area for a lot of reasons. And because it's kind of central, walking to other regions is very doable from there. Generally, if you're going to do a ton of walking, once you exhaust that local area and things that are very easy to reach from it, I think you're probably going to end up taking a taxi or learning public transportation, moving to another portion of the city, and then walking for a while, and then taking public transportation back, because there are different areas of the city that you can explore in that way, and that can make sense. And you can, if you're an extreme walker, you can base anywhere along the Carretera Messiah. You could be all the way up by the lake, and you could walk all the way to Messiah or Granada. That would be an extreme amount of distance. You may want to take a backpack and move from, hotel to hotel as you do that. You probably don't want to do that all in one day, but you can go quite a significant distance. When I lived in Granada, I walked all the way to Messiah. That is a shorter portion of that overall trip. So I know it can be done, but I've never done it. That would be quite an extreme walk, but it would also be very interesting. It's a beautiful highway, but it's not the densest of areas when you get out there. And so you'll be walking past large businesses and large gated areas and have quite a bit of walking between things. And so I think it would be a beautiful walk. I think it would be neat. But maybe I'll do it sometime on the show. But if that's what I was doing as a city walk, I think I would be generally disappointed if I was coming in to do that. Okay, so we've covered, yes, you can do it, why you may want to do it, and why generally you'd want to avoid using Managua as a city walking city. So what do we recommend instead? What should you do? Because obviously we love when people come to Nicaragua and tour the country, and I'm a huge fan of city walks. So what is the alternative? Nicaragua has several cities. We did a video about walkable cities, but that was really about, before someone jumps in and says, didn't you already do this video? That was about places to live in cities where you would walk as someone who lives there. And That makes Managua a little bit better. If you live in a neighborhood like Villa Fontana or Altamires or lots of others, you can live, have a nice apartment or house, and walk to lots of your local businesses, walk to your local grocery, walk to some local restaurants, things that you use as a person who lives there. That's relatively easy, and Managua is walkable in that regards, mostly. But as an exploring the city walkability, it's really poor. But if you have a car and you just want to visit certain areas, like you want to go visit the waterfront and walk around a large area around the waterfront and the parks that are down there, yeah, no problem at all. But not the entire city. You won't get that ability to explore a city in the same way you would in a Madrid or a Rome or a London or a Berlin or a New York City, Chicago, right? None of those. That feeling of, oh, I'm just going to base downtown and walk and really get a feel for the city, that's going to be all but impossible in Managua. Nicaragua has several other cities that are extremely walkable, have absolutely no real worries about safety, no matter how much you'd have to really wander far afield before you ran into anything that would become sketchy, and it'd be very easy for you to avoid them. And some of those cities that are worth considering are Granada, which is the tourist center of the country. So this is extremely walkable. It's a bit smaller of a city, so you may not want to put in a ton of time there. I would recommend, if you're on a walking holiday, maybe use 2 or 3 cities rather than just one, because the cities are relatively small outside of Managua, but they're very walkable. Granada, if you base anywhere in the tourist zone downtown or very close to it to save a little bit of money, but it's only a 5-minute walk back into the city center, you can go see all the famous architecture, some of the really major historic sites, get to lots of restaurants, many museums, beautiful waterfront, parks, and so forth, all very easy. And 1 or 2 days of solid walking, if that's the thing you're doing, will give you a complete idea of the city and a lot of Nicaraguan history. If you need to get a taxi to take you someplace, very easy. If you need public transportation between Managua and there, for example, you come into the airport and need to get out there, you can take a taxi or a bus, all very easy and cheap. Granada is going to be a little bit more expensive, but not bad, and we'll have a lot of options for staying. In fact, it'll have more housing options than Managua does, so that will actually make things easier in that regards. We're going to talk about that in a future video. So Granada is a great option. Leon, where I am here, is another pretty good option. Granada's probably better. Leon is also very walkable, though. It's very safe, safer than Granada for sure. One of the safest cities in the country, has a lot of nightlife. It doesn't have as many interesting sights to see, but it does have an amazing park in the middle of the city. It's got plenty of restaurants. You can get to beaches. I've walked from the city to the beaches. That would be extreme, but it can be done. Use a map. Check those distances. Only you know how you walk. If you're a serious hiker, yep, that's an option, but it's a long distance. But it's also open countryside and very safe as long as you're not doing it in the dark. And so you have good places to walk here. If you want to hike non-city things, both Granada has a cloud forest volcano. Leon has surfing and more traditional, black lava volcanoes. There's things you can hike if that's what you're into. If you just want to walk around the city, both of them have easy city walks, lots of things you can see. You can easily pull up maps and check out all the churches or historic districts or plazas and parks and those kinds of things, and see quite a bit of the cities. They will be different than Managua, but it'll give you a much better feel of like what Nicaragua is really like. Managua is pretty unique for the country, just because of the way it was built and because of the earthquake that hit it in 1972. Up in the highlands, all 3 cities in the highlands are quite walkable. However, Jinotega is very small, and I'm generally not going to recommend it as a city walk destination. I love the city, and you guys can check out my videos. It's some of my most popular ever up in Jinotega. I walked the city a bit. I walked a lot of the city in that walk. If you live in Jinotega, it's a great city to walk around. But if your goal is to stay in a city and walk and explore, it's going to be too small. You're going to see it all in half a day and go, oh, now what do I do other than sitting at a cafe and thinking about walking back? Esteli and Matagalpa, however, are much larger cities, and they offer a lot of walking opportunities. They're quite safe. Matagalpa is definitely not as safe as Leon, but should be more safe than Granada. We all hear horror stories of the park at night in Matagalpa, horror stories being mostly people getting mugged, not really, really terrible things, but that's not pleasant. That's something you want to do. Again, if you're city walking, you're probably doing it during the day. However, I'm a nighttime city walker. You guys only see my videos during the day. I prefer walking at night. I absolutely love it, and I do it a lot, and that makes some cities less safe under different conditions. Matagalpa is one of those that I hear so many warnings about walking late at night that I do it a bit less. When I'm in Matagalpa, I walk the outskirts of the city rather than the downtown late at night. Maybe I'm just being overly cautious, but I don't want to not pass on that information because I've heard it from a lot of sources. It's probably relatively true that at least the downtown parks get a little bit sketchy once the sun goes down. Sometimes they're also just packed. So if they're packed, you're going to be pretty safe. Pickpockets, of course, are a possibility, but nothing to be really scared of. There is a lot of great like cafes and stuff though in Matagalpa, so if you stay away from those sketchy areas and just look for places you can hang out at night, there's quite a bit of that, so it's good for that. There are also more pleasant weather up in the mountain cities, so Matagalpa and Esteli make for really great walking simply because it's not as hot. That's just a really big feature. They're also architecturally and historically very different than Leon and Granada. So if you're looking at going to a more than one place, they can be really nice as an alternative where you can see a completely different part of Nicaraguan culture with different food, different activities, different lay of the land and everything. Having those different regions is pretty interesting. Those are the main cities that I would consider walking. You can also go to some place like Chinandega. It's very walkable, very safe, but it's also super hot, has no tourists, and there's very little to see. The architecture is very bland, not to knock on Chinandega, but there's nothing really to go to see. Its central parks are very nice. It has some nice churches. Every city is going to offer you nice churches and some history on that stuff. Even walking around El Sauce, some tiny village in the middle of nowhere, has a beautiful downtown church and a really nice park. But those things are all relatively small, and you'll see them very quickly walking around the town. It is true, a lot of Nicaraguan towns, once you get away from the big cities, get very cookie cutter. They're going to have different streets and a few different things, of course, but the style of the houses, the look of the streets, and if you can watch my videos when I go farther afield, you're not getting a wild difference between the different locations that I go to. It's part of the nature of Nicaragua, which makes it nice. If you like the style of living, you can go almost anywhere in the country and find something akin to what you like. If you find a village or a city that has a nice river going through it or something that's really different, that can create some variety, and then they have to build differently because of it. It's one of the things that makes Matagalpa so interesting. Not only is it high in the mountains, but the Rio Grande comes right through the middle of the city, and so there's a lot of things built along the river, and it's created some architecture and city design elements that are quite interesting and different. So I think my recommendations would be some combination of Granada, Leon, Esteli, and Matagalpa. Most likely I would recommend doing at least 2 cities. If this is a walking holiday that you're coming on, I would choose one of either Granada or Leon and one of either Matagalpa or Esteli. And if you have time or the inkling, doing 3 or all 4 of them could be great. A little bit of walking around Managua, not a problem, but I wouldn't base my holiday around it. Mostly I would say the waterfront and the capital district is quite nice and worth checking out. Whether it's the Capitol Mall and the buildings and structures of the government, which is always interesting to see, or Salvador Allende Park on the waterfront, or some of the museums down there, the old cathedral that was destroyed in the earthquake, all of that can be really interesting and beautiful. Great place to take pictures, just wander around. But as some other people have said in other Nicaragua tourism videos, boy, during the day you go down there and it's just empty, and that's pretty much true. It's places where there's a bit of nightlife, but walking around a lot of those areas of the city, people aren't out there during the day. You'll be more or less on your own, but they are very safe. Walking around Los Robles or coming down the Carretera Messiah can make for an interesting cut through the city, but I would limit that probably to just one day. Maybe start at the waterfront, walk around in the morning, take some pictures, just get a beautiful sense of this great part of municipal government-based Nicaragua. Head down the Carretera Messiah from there, go as far as you feel you want to go until you give up, and then head to one of the other cities where it's more walkable. Basically, all of your other cities in Nicaragua are walkable, but the number of those that you're going to want to explore are relatively minimal as that type of holiday. So Arrivas, for example, yes, completely walkable, but is it something you're going to want to explore? Nagarote, tiny city, beautiful. I like walking around it, but it's not going to take you an entire day. So those kinds of things can be, challenging if you want to be able to base somewhere and just get up in the morning, get breakfast, and walk out around the city, or like me, go out at night and walk around the city. You're not going to probably have enough to keep you entertained. So I think the larger cities are important. Certainly, any place that looks interesting, and if you just want to hop from one city to another each day, that works just fine too. Then the smaller cities, Boaco, Huigalpa, all of them will work just fine. You can walk around those cities, and each of them really are unique, of course, as cities are, and get different food, different architecture, different part of the country. Typically, cities are spread out in different regions here in Nicaragua, so every city is going to have a little bit something different to offer, just climatically and from a topographical perspective. So I do encourage you, if you like walking cities, certainly come to Nicaragua, walk our cities, explore on foot. It is a great way to encourage the cities to grow in good ways, explore the restaurants and cafes and businesses downtown, pop in and give them your custom, but Managua is very difficult for that, so temper your expectations with the capital. It's just not a very walkable city, which is unfortunate, but I do plan to make more and more city guides for Managua, especially in the coming year, because I really do like the city. I do want to promote the city. I want to get more people coming and visiting Managua, but probably not on foot. I will do it on foot. I will bring you lots of the city. I will film lots of it for you guys. So if you feel like you need to see it and you're wondering how you will get to, I will do my best to bring you more of it. But I don't necessarily recommend it as, at least as your first time. If you come, you explore the city, and you're like, I'm going to take my chances. This is the thing I want to do. I'm really interested in moving to the city, so I really have to get a lay of the land completely, and that's on foot is how to do that. Absolutely. That's a very different thing. But if it's just your holiday and you just want to experience Nicaragua, better options. Probably Granada as a second city. I would personally pick Matagalpa, but I know an awful lot of people would pick Esteli. Both of them are great choices. I live in Leon, so it's hard not to say it's a good choice too. All four of them are going to work really well for you. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe if you'd like to help support the channel. You can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. That comes directly to me and helps so much make this channel possible. I really appreciate everyone who sponsors the show. If you take a moment to share this on social media, tell some friends about the show, get some more subscribers for us, that does a lot to help keep us going. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you all tomorrow.